Hello, welcome back to the YouTube channel of Bethel Evangelical Free Church Hanley. I'm Pastor Gervais Charnley, and this is the small and beautiful Broadstone Chapel in rural Shropshire. It's a type of building that you find up and down England, a little country chapel. It's located in a shrunken village. Is this a medieval chapel that became a farm building and then became a chapel again? Is this a medieval farm building that became a chapel? It certainly seems to be the right place to be a medieval church. It may very well be 12th, 13th century. It's a chapel of ease. It's not a parochial church. It has no parish. It has no burial ground. It's here, well back from the road. I had to know it was here to get here because there's no signposts. Now, there are clearly services here. It's clearly a loved and used church. It has its own font now and all sorts of things. But it's one of those buildings with its simple benches, its furniture, has a certain feel of a well-scrubbed farmhouse kitchen. It's one of those buildings that is, one fears today, a little bit marginal, and yet it is so good to see these places still in use, and we do pray that indeed they may be used of the Lord and that the gospel will be preached here. So let's have a look around this beautiful, beautiful little church. So here we have it, Broadstone Chapel, and we're standing right at the west end. This is how I like to do these videos, start at the west end and move east, because that's how you're supposed to enter the church. You come in at a door towards the western end of the church, and of course at the west end is the font, and the font is at the west end because it symbolises the entry into the church. The font, as you can see, is actually quite a modern one, although it's a old style. The date is MD. That is 1843, the font. This is the Chapel of Ease. Would they have had a font originally? Probably not. We'll have a better look at the earthworks when we go outside. And you can see simple lancet windows, simple roof structure. You have these copies of paintings attached to the roof beams. It's a simple building. There's just the three bays of the roof, and the final bay is the chancel. Of course, there's no structural distinction between them. There's an old picture at the back here that shows the chapel before restoration, and it's an interesting thing to look at because particularly the west end has been restored. You can see actually a hole in the roof when this was done, and this was in 1790. It looked like that, and now here we are over 2 centuries later, and it's clearly been much restored, much loved. You've got these Victorian benches, and the simple benches very much reflect the kind of chapel this is, the kind of building this is. Simple communion table, which is 17th century, and the pulpit is also 17th century. It's not very well lit here, but there is the 17th century pulpit. Now, is it original to this church, or has it come from somewhere else? There's a lot of 17th century pulpits around here. There's no indication. The reed organ, or what the rest of us call a harmonium, has the reed organ treasury number 1, original compositions arrangements for the harmonium and American organ. So it's a simple harmonium, foot pumped. There is the Bible, which is quite an old Bible, and it is the it was given July the 14th, 1912, 6th Sunday after Trinity. But the date is 1905, so it's 1905 Bible, and it's given to, you can see there, Broadstone, Chapel of Ease, Munslow Parish. There again is that Jacobean pulpit. This is interesting. This is the minister's seat. You can see it's such a narrow, such a small building that the minister's seat is actually built in next to the reading desk. Again, this very lovely 17th century communion table. You can see from the way it's carved, it's supposed to face this way and the other side is plainer. There's a very simple east window for the glory of God in memory of Thomas Crump Powell, died June the 5th, 1891. Stand here and window. There's a reconstruction rather than a reproduction of Leonardo's Last Supper. Looking west, to these simple benches, open backs for simple country folk. And it is very much that kind of building. A simple country chapel of ease. Now, we'll go outside and we can see when we go outside again, just have a look up at the roof slightly, you can see some of the changes that there have been since the 1790s. Just before that, actually, you've got at the back of this, you've got George Davis, art publisher and picture framer, number 7, the Turl, Oxford. So that tells us where they got the pictures from. Yes, they've both got Mr. Davis on them. So back to the font, and we'll head outside. So here we are outside Broadstone Chapel, and you can see that it's now got, as it didn't back in the 17th century, didn't have its little bellcot, and it's got that bellcot with that basically strengthened bit below it. Now, as we look along here, we see a hollow way and a building platform, and this tells us that we are in the midst of a medieval shrunken village. That when the chapel was built, again assuming that it was built as a chapel and not as a farm building, but when the chapel was built, there was a bigger village here. There are a number of these in this part of Shropshire, shrunken villages, and there are also some lost villages where nothing survives but the earthworks and a church or chapel in the midst. So the chapel nestles in the landscape here, and we will stroll around the outside because this is a sheep pasture. It's not going to be disturbed by walking down the sheep. It's a very small building. The windows that we see today are 19th century, although they very much reflect a sort of this Lancet architecture, and quite rightly so, given such a simple. It has a little yard around it, but not a burial ground. See the bellcot there, that's the full length of the building. And simple Lancet structure, just reflecting the and they're slightly overgrown hedges there, overgrown rose bushes in the east end, looking terribly rustic, because it is a terribly rustic building. This is one of those buildings that it's never been important to anyone other perhaps than the people here, for whom of course it is their place of worship, it is their church. And here in the midst of the earthworks of the shrunken village we have the chapel, four square stone structure with no porch, no need for a church porch here, off the road in the middle of a field basically. And it's always been a chapel of ease. It's never had a resident clergyman, it's never had a parochial status. It's always been a chapel to Munslow. And so here we are back at the churchyard gate. It was open when I got there. I assume that they allow the sheep to come and graze in there, which would make some sense. And so here we are, back past the rose bush, and to the door of this little chapel, parish of Munslow, Broadstone Chapel. Very good to find it open at this time with the COVID, and there beyond is the building platform. Of course, we're going back to normal after lockdowns now, so it's a good thing. If you're Traumatised by mention of lockdown, I apologise. Yes, they do allow the sheep to graze here. So here we are along the wall, and very, very simple. One does lean towards the feeling that yes, this is a medieval chapel. There are others quite similar to it in the area. A medieval chapel still in use today, which it always amazes me. But I'm very glad it's a good amazement. It's got some problem with the roof at the moment, and one does hope that it will be fixed. So there we are. Very simple, very straightforward. Only a short video because it's only a tiny little chapel. The Broadstone Chapel, Munslow Parish. And I trust you find this interesting. I'm excited by buildings like this because you don't often find something tiny and with a shrunken village and earthworks and all this sort of thing. It's magnificent. It's one of the tiny churches in England. Well, thank you for watching, and may God bless you and keep you. Amen.